Hello and welcome to Building SaaS on AWS, the AWS SaaS Factory show for builders of SaaS here on Twitch. My name is Anthony McClure, and I am a solutions architect with the AWS SaaS Factory and your host for today's show. If you are a builder of SaaS or are just beginning the process of learning how to design, develop, and deploy applications into a multi-tenant environment, then this is the show for you. As with every episode, we bring in SaaS experts in the various elements of SaaS to go deep into those topics with you. And today, of course, is no exception to that. In fact, today is a exciting episode for us because it is the first episode of 2024 for Building SaaS on AWS and the first episode of this new season. For this episode, I have presented, or we are going to be presenting, a roundtable discussion, always something fun, where we bring in community members that are experts in SaaS and talk about relevant topics of the day. In today's show, we're going to be taking, first of all, a little bit of a retrospective back look into 2023, the exciting and fun things that we encountered during the year, as well as the more difficult things as well. And lastly, we'll do a bit of a follow-up with that by taking a prognosticative look into 2024 as well. So to help facilitate that, I actually have, as I mentioned, a bunch of community members, as well as another member from the SaaS Factory you may recognize as my guest. And we'll start out today with somebody that is absolutely familiar with building SaaS on AWS and, of course, her own show and blog and all sorts of great things. We have with us Gwen Shapira, CPO of Nile. Gwen, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Anthony.
If you could really quickly, Gwen, tell our audience and also say hello to everybody that is joining us live this morning. Yes, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put those into the comments box, and Bill and I will try and get to those comments as soon as we can. But Gwen, could you please introduce yourself, what it is that you do?
Yeah, so Gwen, I work for Nile. I co-founded Nile 2 years ago. We are building serverless Postgres specifically for SaaS. So we're putting a lot of the tenant concepts into the database, isolation. What would it be like to back up a tenant, to resolve performance issues for a specific tenant? And before that, I was at Confluent, where I led the cloud native Kafka team. And before that, I had a long career. I'm a bit old. I spent a lot of time building data architectures in various companies.
Well, fantastic, Gwen. And of course, you have a pretty large community of your own that you look after as well, right?
Yes, the SaaS developer community. I
Yes.
am proud to be the person who realized 2 years ago that people building SaaS are a community, not just people selling SaaS and marketing SaaS, and that they need a home. And it was a pleasure to discover that people in AWS feel the same way.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And so, welcome, Gwen, back to the show for another episode with us here. Next, I'd like to bring on Ryan Worrell. Ryan is the co-founder of WarpStream Labs. Welcome to the show, Ryan. Introduce yourself as well.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I'm the co-founder and CTO of WarpStream Labs. We build a product called WarpStream, which is a cloud native replacement for Apache Kafka. Basically, we have a Kafka compatible interface for our product, but it runs as a stateless auto-scaling container inside your cloud account that stores data inside S3 and uses S3 as both the storage and network layer to provide a lower cost and lower operation solution compared to running the open source Apache Kafka product yourself.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you so much, Ryan, for being here with us today. We'll come back to you in just a moment. Let's introduce our third panelist. I'd like to introduce to everyone John Yu. John Yu is the CEO of Sugar.io. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Anthony. As a quick intro, I'm John, CEO of Sugar. What we do is we help software companies list their products on AWS Marketplace, as well as other cloud marketplaces, as well as order execution around being able to sell on these cloud marketplaces, but also collaborate with the cloud providers around opportunity management and the whole works that go into co-sell. And so, really glad to be here, a little bit out of my depths a bit because, I'm not an engineer by trade, but I hope I can keep up with some of the conversation.
Oh, no. We know you do, John. Not to hide here. And last but certainly not least, we actually were planning to have on with us this morning Todd Golding of the AWS SaaS Factory. Unfortunately, Todd had to be away at a customer, so I guess maybe not such a bad thing really when it comes down to it. But we have an awesome replacement in my good friend, my colleague, my co-worker, and my partner in crime here producing the AWS SaaS Factory presents Building SaaS on AWS, Mr. Bill Tarr. Hey, Bill, how you doing?
Hey, everybody. Already said hi to everyone over there on the chat. I'll be doing double duty today, so you guys can come chat with us in the chat over on Twitch if you want, or if you're joining us on YouTube, we'll see those chats as well. So feel free to introduce yourselves, ask any questions. This is going to be a panel episode. So there's going to be lots of opportunities if you guys hear any topics that pop up that sound interesting. If you want to hear more about what WarpStream is doing, if you want to hear all the cool news coming out of the Nile, if you want to learn more about Marketplace, feel free to just ping us on any of those questions. And I'll be here along with Anthony to sort of handle some of the general SaaS questions if any of those do happen to come up as well. But hey, it's great to be on again, and it's great to see everybody back in the chat live again. So let's enjoy the show.
Thank you so much, Bill. Hey, Bill, while I got you here too, maybe you could say a few words about SaaS Factory and what SaaS Factory does too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anthony and I both work for a team at AWS, and we're a partner team. So we work with partners who are building SaaS on AWS. And this is kind of a special episode for me because we have three very important partners with AWS here on with us, customers that I've been talking to are building on AWS, building cool tools for SaaS, and sort of in the category of something that our team talks about, SaaS for SaaS, because our team does direct engagement, where we do work directly with people who are building SaaS and help them to build their SaaS products. But increasingly, we're also doing a lot of different initiatives to help connect SaaS customers with other people building SaaS, building out a SaaS community, trying to connect the dots in terms of the build versus buy proposition of SaaS, telling SaaS customers how they can use other SaaS to help build their products. So those are just a few of the things our teams do. And we publish a lot of blogs and do things like building SaaS on AWS too. So these are just a few of the things that the SaaS Factory does at AWS.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill, for that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our topic for today, starting out with a bit of a retrospective back into 2023. So for the panel, when looking back into 2023, what was some of the more prominent trends that you see taking place or have taken place into SaaS and maybe even going into 2024? Why don't we go ahead and start with you, Gwen? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, I've been seeing three things. So first of all, I know I've been saying it pretty much every year since 2018, but serverless is still going very strong and getting stronger. I see it just becoming more mainstream. If I had to compare, maybe 2 years ago, people had some serverless workloads and not everyone. People were maybe a bit apologized. They don't know if it's the right thing to use Lambda. We're seeing a lot more that just, yeah, of course, the right architecture, it saves me money. This is natural that my control plane is serverless. It's very natural that I have things in the edge that are serverless. Edge workloads, again, something that was going on for a while, used to be pretty niche. These days, I cannot have a conversation about SaaS performance, which is usually web performance, without people discussing, oh yeah, I am deploying my app on the edge. I'm using maybe Cloudflare. I'm using maybe the AWS edge machines. All those things are becoming a lot more mainstream and normalized. And the last thing that I've been seeing a lot of, and again, I've been raising the flag about this trend for 2 years, and I feel like I've been dismissed. I think this year I've been vindicated.
Vindication, huh?
Yes. Customers don't necessarily want to run anything on the vendor's AWS account. They really want to have the vendor help them run things in their account. And yes, a lot of vendors don't want to hear it. It can be harder to run things in someone else's account. It can be harder to debug. Lots of things are harder. But the ask for customers is so clear. And there are so many good tools. And I think this is another thing that is no longer exotic. Everyone is telling me, oh yeah, I'm using cross-account roles. I'm using lambdas to run some things that I need. And like the techniques that used to be like you had to be top expert to know what you're doing, now literally everyone is doing, and it's just this not something that people get into arguments about as much as they used to, I would say.
I think that's fascinating, Gwen, and I find personally both of those to be, or all three of those actually, to be very true as well. Certainly what we're seeing in the market, there is a continual movement towards serverless technologies. We see more and more customers that are moving that way, are coming in with an initial thought process of actually starting serverless instead of having to be kind of convinced of that, right? It's almost becoming more of a default as we move forward. And that can still lean its, there's different ways to do that serverless aspect too. We have the Lambda side of it, of course, at AWS, but EKS is from a serverless perspective of EKS is still really popular at this point too. Maybe I'd ask the question to chat. Chat, what do you think as far as serverless is concerned? Is it really at this point in time the more mainstream option as we move forward with, especially with new solutions going out there? And also when it comes down to building SaaS, the question of running workloads in the vendors' accounts versus your customers' accounts, is that something that you're seeing and that you're interested in as well? I know here at AWS, we're doing a lot of internal thinking on this very topic too. And how do you make that easier, right? That's really what we're looking at from an AWS perspective. Thank you for that, Gwen. Maybe Ryan, same question. Any prominent trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think this is surely just bias from the types of customers that I speak to, but budget pressure is huge.
Yes.
Or was huge in 2023, and I'm sure it's still going to continue to be huge in 2024. Going back to what Gwen was mentioning around bring your own account, the pressure of, there's tons of reasons for this. Data sovereignty, security, privacy. That is a huge reason that we designed WarpStream the way that we did, where the customer runs the data plane in their cloud account. We actually don't even need cross-account access. So it's like completely isolated from that perspective. We have no access to the data running in the data plane in the customer's account, just because the kinds of prospects that we're engaging with, it's just a non-starter to ship all their data to a vendor, whether that's for cost reasons, because they would have to pay internet transit or at least intra-region transit if they're in the same AWS region, or for those data sovereignty and security reasons. Like we're a fairly new company, so even if we can go through every compliance certification that exists, but if your company is new, no one is going to trust that in the same way as if they really know that you have no access to their data. So it brings us a big advantage to be able to say, not only is it bring your own account, it's bring your own account, and we don't have the keys. That trend, I think, was very compelling for the prospects that we were engaging with last year, and I think it's going to continue to be a big trend in the future.
Customers got pretty sophisticated about the keys. Like they're reading every line of what permissions you give, the cross-account role and everything.
Yeah,
that's another thing that's been going on. They question every single, like, why do you need this thing?
Yeah.
And Ryan, building your SaaS solution and really kind of looking at it from the beginning, from an architectural view of knowing that this is going to be bring your own account from the get-go, right? For all the reasons that you mentioned. It makes it difficult on the SaaS provider, especially when you're looking at control plane, right? So, how you handle the telemetry coming back from those customers, it becomes a pretty big challenge in those cases.
Yeah, so we designed the control plane data plane split for WarpStream to be pretty hard. Like there's a ton of isolation there, and that provided us the benefit of not like we knew that we were doing that from the beginning, so we never had any opportunity to get things mixed up in a way that would be complicated for us to manage. But if you were starting off with a different architecture, like you had an application that you had designed purely to run multi-tenant inside your own account, transitioning that into a bring your own account model would be a potentially multi-year undertaking. So I'm glad that we made the choice that we did to do such a hard isolation split from the beginning. The telemetry that's generated, we designed it to be as minimal as it possibly could to function. If you're familiar with the way that the Apache Kafka protocol works, we essentially run all of the protocol messages that are not produce and fetch, so the data plane messages basically, those run in the customer's account, but we proxy all the other messages back to our control plane. So we still get all the benefits of running, we can do upgrades to the control plane software on a regular cadence, but the customer still gets the data plane isolation and sovereignty benefits from running the agent inside their account. And we don't have access to any of the actual data there. I think there are other kinds of products where that would be way more complicated.
Right.
Designing that control plane data plane split wouldn't be nearly as straightforward as it would be for
clean.
It's very clean with Apache Kafka, kind of because it already had a little bit of a control plane data plane split with Zookeeper and the Kafka workers. So we kind of got to piggyback on that from the beginning.
Amazing. Thank you, Ryan. Let's bring John into this question as well. John, any specific prominent trends that you saw in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely couldn't agree more with some of the conversation around bring your own account, because around marketplace, and we help companies sell a marketplace. Oftentimes, it's a simple SaaS offering, or they'll containerize a solution. And more often or increasingly so, there's been a lot of demand for containerizing solutions and having it run in the customer's VPC. And we're seeing that constantly also dive into kind of security concerns, right? And would a panel be a panel if someone didn't bring up AI? And I think a lot of the discussions around AI has been creating a lot of conversations around, like, where's the data? Is my data being used to train your model? Are you going to pay me for it? I'm sure from the consumer perspective, you guys have been following like the New York Times lawsuit. And do you have to pay a licensing fee for something like this? Not to get into the legal aspect of things, but it's really, in addition to Ryan's comment around, budgets going down, when we get into security compliance, conversations, that is something that I've noticed no one ever used to ask before 2023, but now every questioner is, are you using my data? And so, as we think about, like, we're not training a model, but we do have a ton of marketplace transactions that are going through our system. And internally, we've always thought, okay, is there some way that we can use this to create a, not to be hand wavy, but like a co-pilot or a prescribe the best next action around how to sell through cloud marketplaces? But, after a more in-depth discussions with our customers, it's always around, we have to meet a few requirements, right? Like, we have to allow opt-in, we have to give advance notice, of course, and we have to be in compliance with all the, data laws, GDPR and DPA, et cetera. And so that's been a really interesting thing that I'm sure will continue in 2024.
Thank you very much, John. Bill, what about you? What would you add here?
We've already covered so many great topics. I think I'd double click on one of the things Ryan said about budgets. I ended out last year talking about costs, and I've started this year. The first customer conversation I had is about costs.
Right.
Everybody's become a little bit more, it's not, so I was going to say cost conscious, but I don't think that's the right word. I think everyone's become a little bit more aware of the need to eventually become profitable with SaaS.
Right.
I think there was a time that the language was growth. How do you grow your SaaS as quickly as possible? How do you get as many logos? And that's a great conversation. That doesn't go away, but increasingly everyone's turning more scrutiny on how you built your SaaS, whether that's going to lead to long-term profitability, whether any individual customer or tier of customers is profitable. Like, these conversations, we weren't having them a couple of years ago, or if we were, it was only with very large SaaS providers who'd reached a point where they had all of the instrumentation and telemetry that Ryan was talking about, all built out, they had a complete picture. And then they started to say, ooh, wait, we could look at this and figure out how we should set up our pricing tiers to be profitable. Or, hey, these particular customers are using all of this load on our system. Why are we not charging them in an appropriate way to reflect that that they're using, putting noisy neighbor issues with some of our tenants, or perhaps they're just costing us a lot because they're using this one AI ML feature all the time. Like, this has increasingly become not a, hey, we're having a problem, come fix it, a preemptive, like, we have to understand our costs and we have to get in front of these conversations now. And then eventually, by the time, we have to make these decisions, or when a VC comes and asks us, hey, when are you guys going to be profitable? We have all of that data and we can paint a very clear picture for them about how much it costs to support our customers and what that's going to look like in the long term for our profitability. I think that was, for me personally, that was the biggest trend. The other thing I would take a look at is the people we have on the show today. We've got somebody from Marketplace. I think Marketplace has been trending really strongly, maybe because we wanted to, maybe because AWS is pushing Marketplace a lot. I think there's a little bit of that, but I think there's a strong reason. And there's strong reasons for it, right? We're starting to see customers prefer to purchase through Marketplace. We're starting to see it being easier to list on Marketplace, and Marketplace integrators like Sugar coming along, making that journey easier. And then the third trend I'll call out, because we also have two infrastructure SaaS providers here, is the viability of infrastructure SaaS. And we're seeing some of these, the first conversation we're having about whether you deploy a customer account or whether you deploy your own accounts, there's different types of SaaS. And Gwen, you wrote a blog about this ages ago in the Nile, when I first became aware of the Nile, about infrastructure SaaS. And how infrastructure SaaS has different needs. It's not the same creature as Salesforce or some other, third party. You could just use this with a web browser and everything works wonderfully. There's a lot more implications to how those work. And we're starting to see some very successful infrastructure SaaS companies. And for some reason, they all used to work at Confluent.
Yeah.
No, some people used to work at Datadog.
Oh, this is true too. So anyway, I think the people we have on the show are also very reflective of some of the trends that I've seen in SaaS this past year.
I want to double down real quick too on the comments about cost, and kind of leading with cost as an opening question, right? We see this a lot now with our competency partners for SaaS, our SIs, systems integrators that are going out there and working with customers, that they're actually leading with cost as almost as a sales tool, right? Going into our customers and saying, hey, let's take a look at your financial operations here within your SaaS product and see where can we save you money, because it's almost inevitable that customers were in that first category that Bill was talking about, right? They really didn't think about the operational side of it, the cost side of it, until they've been up and running for some time, unless they're a really very large customer. So there's always money that can be found, our SIs are finding. And by tackling that, it allows those customers to then create new projects or go ahead and implement new projects, because there's capital that they were already spending, right? So kind of starting out with FinOps seems to be a very popular way of interacting with our customers. I think we're going to continue to see that trend as well. All right, so let's take a look at
Anthony.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. I just want to chime in and ask a question for the group of around the cost issue. How do you think that starts to impact product roadmap of a lot of these companies? As buyers aren't really looking for the best-in-class solution, like point solutions. Sometimes, if they're more cost-sensitive, they're more willing to, purchase a bundled solution that is kind of not an MVP, but doesn't have to be the best in class, is the most expensive, but just good enough across a wide range of portfolio. So kind of curious to the group, is that something that you've thought into, of how do we increase the product scope so that as the effective unit price goes down, you're able to provide a wider offering to at least keep the average deal somewhat sustainable?
I would say that what you describe is one very specific way that customers think about cost. And I don't know that I've seen so much. I've seen some of that, but there are a lot of other ways that I've seen. And I think there is a lot of variance. I've seen customers who want more flexibility about the packaging. For example, high availability is something that different layers of availability have cost to them. As customers get more sophisticated, they start negotiating, can you cut my price in half and remove 1 or 2 nines? I'm not going to need them. Or even more interesting, I have some tenants that are really important, really production, gives them all the nines and they pay for it. I will make them pay for it. They can be expensive. But the other tenants, my other customers, they can be on put them on cheap hardware. It can crash every once in a while. I don't actually care all that much. I don't want to pay a lot for them. They are not going to pay me a lot. I cannot make them pay me a lot. So people start thinking about, I think Bill mentioned that, how much they're getting paid by their customers, how much they're paying their vendors, and can they do what airlines have been doing for ages, tier it up very accurately for everyone needs.
I think I would add there that lower cost doesn't always necessarily have to mean worse. That's the history of computing is filled with making things better and cheaper at the same time.
That's right.
And that's, performance optimization is one of the, there's more than one area, but performance optimization is one of the cost savings, pillars, when you're running an at-scale business in the cloud that provides both a benefit to the customer and a cost savings. So there's lots of room, I think, because of this budget pressure, I think will lead to some more innovation in the infrastructure space that will, the new entrants that are delivering that cost savings will potentially have an advantage in the short term because they can, they'll take advantage of these new innovations that they've discovered or, brought from another domain to improve the infrastructure, both from a cost and a performance, or cost and reliability, cost and ease of operations perspective.
And it can be very, things that you don't even think about, right? Customers that have been running workloads on very old instances from AWS, right? Their new instances cost less, perform better. And those little things, sometimes you just don't even think about it, right? But it's there. But sometimes you need a helping hand to step in and say, hey, have you take a look at this? You might be much better off using instance X versus instance Y.
Can we give a shout out to the new Graviton 3?
Yes, absolutely.
In improving performance, cutting costs, and everything.
Absolutely. And another one too, I think, to Gwen's point, take a look at the new release on the S3 side of the house, right? It's maybe reducing some of those nines, because we don't need 11 nines of durability if all you need is a scratch pad location for doing some in-flight work. So, AWS is trying to respond to this question of cost and performance and capability as well, and really trying to right-size the solutions for what we see our customers doing. So that's something that we continue to look at as well. We have a question here that came in. Maybe John, this would be a good one for you to respond to with the recent pricing release information that came out and reInvent regarding marketplace. How have you seen the market respond to that at all? I would imagine it would be positive, but I would love to hear from the community.
I can't contain my excitement. It's probably the best news. Christmas came early, waited another month, and honestly, that news beat any Christmas news or Christmas gift I could have gotten. The way that our customers and just the space at large think about this is, well, it's the same as 3% or 1.5% to 3% is just equivalent to a payment processing fee, right? Would you rather pay via a Stripe card, a credit card, or would you rather pay via marketplace? And in the past, it caused a ton of, I say, lack of adoption, especially as you mentioned, there's kind of a pressure from a margin perspective. We can't give away 7 to 10%.
Right.
You can't even get down the conversation when you're, to the C-suite, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This opened the
doors. You laughed out of the
room,
right? Yeah.
Right. If the buyer said, hey, this is the only way that we will procure, sure, we'll eat the cost. But then now this is something that they actually are very excited about, the flywheel of transacting on marketplace, collaborating with AWS sellers. I could go on and on and on about this forever and shout it from the rooftops, but I think it really is going to explode the growth of marketplace, people adopting it as not just procurement channel, but really doing a lot more from public offers, getting people to, try new products and deploy it with one click. That's really what the vision of B2B marketplaces in the original days was, right? And so very excited to see what happens in 2024.
No, thank you. Speaking of that, as we're on kind of the topic of reInvent here, reInvent, of course, happens at the end of the year every year. So there's always some great new announcements that come from that. But other technologies come out throughout the year too. So for the panel again here, out of these announcements, maybe that came out of reInvent, I think we already know John's favorite. Is there anything that really kind of stood out to you that you were looking forward to or thought was great? Ryan, maybe we can start with you this time.
Yeah, I think the answer for me is probably pretty obvious, but it's S3 Express One Zone. We wrote a blog post on the WarpStream blog the day that the new tier was announced. I guess my summary of it would be that you can totally use it for those Scratchpad type use cases, and I'm sure that was a huge part of the customer demand aspect of AWS bringing that product to market. Was I want to use this as my Scratchpad for Spark or Flink, something like that. That was probably a huge part of it. But for us at WarpStream, what we're planning on doing with that tier is landing the recently written data for a subset of your topics in S3 Express One Zone and delivering that consistent low latency, and then offering another tier of topics that use S3 standard that deliver lower cost and slightly higher latency. So we're going to be able to give customers that tunable trade-off of I'm willing to pay more for lower latency, pay less for higher latency. But it's really great to see that offering from Amazon, because I know it's been a gap for a long time. I know that on the hardware and the technology side, this was totally a doable product for a while. And I'm sure it just took a long time for AWS to figure out exactly, all the right knobs to get the pricing right. And I'm really excited to see it come to market.
Awesome. Hey, Bill, how about you? What would you say was your favorite announcement?
Man, it was so tough. I was just sort of promoting our own blog we just wrote. I sat down after reInvent and I started trying to put this list together. It's always funny because there's very rarely a specific SaaS release announcement. And, nobody's ever saying like, oh, here's the new SaaS product. It's more about the features of SaaS products as they've been coming out. And this year was no different. I think there was a lot of things to like. And if people kind of go through the blog, it took me a while to even come up with a prioritization list, but for some reason, I don't know if anyone on this will have an opinion of this. When I started reaching out to the community, people are really excited about step functions right now, and it's kind of unexpected. This isn't where I started with the thinking about reInvent announcements, but everyone's talking about being able to reach out to HTTPS endpoints from within step functions. A lot of people in the community want to test this out. It's kind of been, step functions always, just being frank, seemed a little disappointing, not because of what they did, but because of what they could do. People were always excited, like, oh man, if it just did these couple more things, we could use it for all of our orchestration. And instead, here we are using some heavyweight tools that aren't AWS native, and integrating back into AWS services means naked HTTP calls, just a lot of very inconvenient ways to do things. So people got a lot of buzz off of that one. Some of the other things that are very geeky and backend, like zero ETL integrations between databases, being able to copy data from one spot to another off for analytics purposes and other things. It's not sexy. Nobody's out there like screaming in the streets that they got this. It was just undifferentiated heavy lifting. They don't have to do
I feel like the zero ETL has been totally like the underrated, the underdog of the reInvent show, because even though it was never a headline, I don't think, as you said, I don't think anyone shouted in the street. The number of people who came to me and said, yes, we're so excited to reduce one less tool, one less thing to run, one less SaaS provider to work with, one less line item in what we're paying, especially since, I don't want to say it, but not a lot of them still pay in the marketplace.
Right.
So for them, managing all those SaaS costs that they're paying out to can be a pretty big deal, and reducing this by several line items, less to account for when you're asking how much a tenant costs me, all those things. I just got so much excitement. I got so many people who are like, okay, so what can we do with Nile if I want to integrate it with Redshift or Databricks or anything, any other large data warehouse? Can I do it without ETL? It just keeps coming up. I think people took ETL as obvious, and suddenly they no longer take it as obvious. So if I have to give one announcement that may have changed the future, this may be it.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was a really big announcement as well. Having this ability kind of out of the box without having to jump through so many hoops always is great, right? We're always looking at ways to eliminate or lift that undifferentiated heavy lifting. And I thought that was a really big announcement down that road. I can't wait to see what people build right from it. That's going to be the fun part moving forward. John, we already talked about Marketplace a bit and the Marketplace announcement, but was there anything else that you'd like to add to that, or any other announcements that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think there's just been a lot of conversation around like Bedrock and Jumpstart, like quick starts. We have a few customers that, you have those like picks and shovel AI companies that are providing, vector database or whatnot, but then there's also a lot of companies that are hosting their models in Bedrock and using Jumpstart to really get started. And I think going back to the earlier point of bringing your own data and making sure that there's clear separation of the data and the models, I think that was a huge conversation topic, and some of the innovation around Bedrock, I think, has been really exciting to see, especially around this cloud race around providing the best ecosystem for AI tooling and models.
Thank you very much. Awesome. All right. Well, for everybody that is new or has joined us in since we began, you are watching Building SaaS on AWS. Today's show is a panel show with some of our great community leaders out here, as well as Bill Tarr is joining us from the AWS SaaS Factory. We've been discussing today a retrospective of 2023, some of the fun announcements that we thought are really good coming out of reInvent as well. And we're going to shift gears now and maybe talk a little bit about 2024 and what we're seeing maybe going into this year as well. So first, what I'd really like to hear from the panel is, are you working on anything interesting here in 2024? Is there anything new that you can discuss? Maybe we'll start with you, John. We ended with you, but we'll start with you here. Anything interesting going on at Sugar?
Oh boy. A lot of stuff going on, a little bit low on sleep. But one big thing that we are definitely trying to push out is we actually, we factored our entire backend to support this actually. So it's kind of a more modular architecture where, or I guess let's start with the use case, right? In a life cycle of a contract or an opportunity, when you're going through a marketplace, there's multiple events that happen that occur through that, right? A private offer gets created, the disbursement gets made, a sales rep needs to get notified around a coastal opportunity with AWS. There's hundreds of notifications, and what we're allowing people to do is kind of this low code way for people to be able to, across each event, be able to trigger certain actions that happen across all their existing tech stack. So whether that's Slack, Salesforce, email notifications, I mean, you name it, Notion, ClickUp, all the collaboration tool. And so really giving the customization optionality to our customers to be able to configure exactly how they want their workflows to occur. And so nice. I think that's really going to open up a lot of doors. I mean, once again, not to do the hand wavy AI thing, but that also, creates a lot of opportunities for us to embed AI into it. So one way is, we can read in the Salesforce schemas and be able to do smart onboarding, like all the field mapping to the AWS, nomenclature, things like that. A lot of stuff around being able to prescribe the best next action based on, how things
predictive some predictive
analytics. Exactly. So I think as soon as we can kind of answer the data concern questions and the legal aspect of it, that'll really open up some doors around what we can do.
Nice. Very cool. Ryan, how about over at WarpStream? Anything interesting going on?
Yeah, we have I'm calling it an alpha of our serverless product, where you can sign up and create an Apache Kafka compatible endpoint. Basically, it's like Kafka as a URL. Basically, is
Nice.
what we're calling it. You can create that in about 100 milliseconds and start producing data to it instantly. That's I think that's available now on warpstream.com. If it's not, then you can contact us and we'll turn it on for your account. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who it's available for quite yet. We also just announced our public pricing for the first time. It's on the website, and we're going to go live with our marketplace listing sometime next month, I hope.
Well, congratulations on that. Yeah, that's always a big effort.
Yeah. So before I started WarpStream, I wasn't really familiar with the AWS marketplace, hardly all, other than I knew it existed. I didn't really know why people used it or what it did, but it really became crystal clear to me when we were talking with a prospect that said, if you are on the marketplace, procurement takes 2 weeks. If you are not, procurement takes 6 months. So that was a very clear signal to me that we should be on the marketplace. So we started that process sometime last month, I think, and I think we're going to be done with it this month. And that's very exciting to me as somebody whose job it is to sell SaaS now. That it seems like a big win for everyone. The customer gets to use their AWS commit. We get a simpler procurement process, integrated payment processing. It makes a lot of sense to me now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I got to raise my hand on that, Ryan, because I love the sound of that. And John, you will agree with this 100%. Hearing somebody say that they started their marketplace journey last month and they're going to be done next month is not the story we used to hear in the past. No. This is one of my favorite things that happened last year, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of this year. Is marketplace onboarding has gotten so much simpler. And it's turned into, and especially with marketplace integrators, our integrators have gotten very mature, like working with Sugar, working with any of their competitors too. But, it gives you such an edge in terms of that experience, because it's one of those undifferentiated heavy lifting items. You might list a couple things on marketplace, but chances are it's a one-time journey for you. Why not pull in somebody who already knows how to do it rather than reinventing the wheel and learning how to do it? But the fact that takes a couple months now blows my mind. We used to talk about like a 6-month journey to get listed on marketplace. So I'm incredibly happy to hear your experience there is going well.
Bill, we got to get you on these customer meetings that I have. That was really compelling.
We've seen the sad stories, John. So yeah,
we've been there.
How about you, Gwen?
Yeah, so I'm also looking forward to make it easier to have people give me money. So I think in the last year, we've been rolling out the MVP of our database and really building out this architecture that lets us isolate tenants. And it feels like 2024 is going to be the year that we get to capitalize on a lot of the foundations that we built. So part of it is that because we have this tenant isolation, we can give you performance metrics, all of this per tenant, which means that we can actually tie it into other systems about how much a tenant is costing you, because as a serverless database, we have a pricing that is tied to these activities that is driven by your customers. So it kind of closes the loop in a nice way that I'm really getting excited about. The other ways that we think we can really use the foundations that we built, and this is very soon, is basically going global. You have databases all over the world. Where do you want each tenant to live, and how to it's related to local regulation and how this interact. So it's going to be extremely cool. So we're basically we made a lot of promises around how isolating tenants will have impact on every part of your SaaS product. Another part that I'm excited about is with AI. As I think was mentioned several times, people are thinking, how do we, everyone wants to make sure that nobody is training on their data. We are starting to see a lot of demand because we promised this isolation of data on Postgres, which has PG Vector as the AI indexing. It lets us guarantee that the data for each of your tenants will never be mixed. You will never be able to accidentally train on data from two of those tenants because we provide isolation on the data you store itself. So we are definitely, these are all things that we are kind of part of. We have parts of it. We have the architecture. We are kind of looking to see going out to the market.
Fantastic. All right, maybe we have enough time, I believe, for one or two more questions, and I'd like to do a little bit of a fun one here, a little self-deprecating on the AWS side, perhaps. But if AWS could wave a magic wand and just make your life better, what would be the thing that you would like to see or produced to make that happen? Ryan, maybe we could start with you on this question. Put you on the spot here.
Yeah, this is a tough one because Amazon pretty consistently delivers things that customers ask for in a timely manner. So there's not a lot that is super burning for me. I think the one that this is extremely low level, but it would be pretty helpful for us is surfacing more infrastructure metrics on EC2 when the network interface is experiencing throttling.
Interesting.
Because we have very little visibility into that today as as a standard AWS customer, and we recommend that our customers use network optimized instances, even if that isn't strictly necessary, because it kind of pushes out the point at which they'll experience that network throttling way further, so that we don't have to worry about that. There may be customers that don't actually need them and are paying for it anyway, just because we have no feedback mechanism to be able to tell them, hey, you're getting network throttled, other than, I can, on our side for our test clusters, I can go look and open Datadog and see that the TCP retransmits went up, and I can guess. But that's there's nothing that's 100% correlated with the instance network interface being throttled.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Ryan. It's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. Yeah, getting access to those metrics would be pretty invaluable, especially when dealing with large levels of data and data transfer. Very interesting thought there. I'd like to open this up to the chat too. I know there's been a little bit of chat conversation back and forth now as far as this one. One suggestion was serverless RabbitMQ. I thought that's kind of an interesting ask. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I see Gwen thumbs up on that one too.
I mean, I think that in general, if anyone wants to have a startup in 2024, pick something out there in the world that is popular and put serverless in front of it, and you have a good startup. It's hard to build it. You then have to go back and start building it. But the traction is going, the market will be there.
Gwen, how about you?
Yeah, so I think I'm kind of on the other end of the sophistication curve from Ryan. A lot of my customers are not infra SaaS. They're what you call very simple SaaS. And I'm in the business of making their life easier. And I think you guys are in the business of making their life easier. And I've been looking for ways. It's always like I wrote a very simple app in JavaScript, in Python, like nothing very sophisticated. And all I want to do is deploy it and have my customers access it and use it. And it should be so simple. And we're getting there. And I feel like we're getting there symptomatically. I want this place where it's so easy to deploy a simple application. I want it to be Amazon. And there used to be Elastic, Beanstalk. And when I started, and where do I deploy my examples? I had several CTO friends telling me, well, this is the past. The future is AWS Amplify. You should be looking at that. So every few months, I'm trying out AWS Amplify. And every time I hit a roadblock, and I'm like, it should be so easy. And every time I go back to what I know and just use EC2 and automate it myself because I have experience doing that. And like at some point, Amplify will be easier, right? If you can make it magic wand, make it next week, and I'll just tear down all my internal demo automation, and you guys will be it.
So Amazon, I'm sorry, Amplify needs some love, I think, is what we're hearing, Gwen. Yeah, to make it easier.
Exactly.
Bill, you have some experience there too, don't you, Bill? As far as Amplify.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I've talked to Gwen about it before. It's one of those tools you love until you hit the point when you don't love it, and it works great for a lot of tasks. Building SaaS right now, it has a lot of potential. And I often see my customers using pieces of Amplify, like, oh,
Right.
that library from Amplify, that front end Amplify is awesome. I'm going to steal that. But then when it actually goes out to build, they end up building something else because they hit a certain wall or they hit. And I think that team is actively working on that. We have some people trying to write a blog about how to build SaaS on Amplify, and hopefully that pushes the envelope a little bit. Because I mean, if I had one thing to ask of our own teams, I have two things to ask of our own teams. But if I had one thing to ask them, it's thinking about multi-tenancy in every service that they build, rather than making it an afterthought and saying, oh, well, you can use DynamoDB. DynamoDB may be the perfect example of a SaaS-friendly service, but you still can't necessarily get all of the multi-tenant metrics out of it you'd like. It still isn't as if they thought of this as a multi-tenant service the way that Gwen and the Nile are thinking about their database as a multi-tenant database as a first-class citizen. That's like the first thought is, how are we going to use this in a multi-tenant fashion? Not after the fact, well, we've got the database now. How do we do multi-tenancy in this database? And unfortunately, we have some services that aren't new. Right. SaaS wasn't really a thing when some of our services were even being built. So now we've got to go back and think about these things and fix them. And between that and something that makes it easier for these cross-account ownership scenarios where you have to put something into customer accounts, I'd love to see us do a better job of managing those scenarios on our customers' behalf, and figuring out how to, from your customer side, make them still feel comfortable that they have compliance control over those accounts. But from the SaaS provider side, if they're going to have to manage those solutions, giving them some kind of access, something special that lets them do things in those accounts without simply having to throw things over the wall. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what that looks like, but I would love to wave a magic wand and say that's easy to do.
I agree that would probably be my number one request as well. And we see it a lot now with the generative AI space, right? Because again, it's, where does the data live that's necessary to feed into that? Whether you're doing retrieval augmented generation and just pulling data and putting it as part of prompts, or maybe even more importantly, if you're doing, pre-training or post-training or ongoing training, how do you do that where the data and the execution, the training exists in the customer's account, but everything else is managed from the SaaS provider? Big questions to answer there, and they're all kind of revolving around this cross-account situation that we've been discussing today. John, real quickly here, we're running up on time, but anything that you would say is a magic wand to help?
Yeah, I think there's a comment around an easy way to manage IAM permissions and policies across hundreds of AWS accounts. That is by far something that is the biggest thorn when we talk to our customers about, hey, what are some problems around managing your marketplace account versus your production account versus blah, 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 blah. And so it always leads to kind of a bang your head against a keyboard problem that, I think hopefully we'll be able to get to solve. But overall, I think from the Sugar experience, it's been an amazing, to build on AWS. Like, we're fully built. Like, we came out of YC. The amount of B2B software companies there that, quickly build, where speed of development is more important than really anything else. Being able to stand something up on AWS. I mean, we use EKS, RDS, Lambda. I mean, S3. The whole works has made our tech stack like incredibly simple. And really quick to build products, which in early days was very important for us. So IAM thing, big one, although I got to say.
IAM, it can be, it's amazingly powerful, but very difficult at the same time, right? Especially,
I think the trend is to use a lot of accounts. So the advice of AWS, we went with, as we're going multi-region, we went with account per region. And it has a lot of benefits. It allows us to stamp out new regions as a unit, and it's really nice. But managing permissions has been,
Well, folks, it's been absolutely wonderful having you all here today. We're coming up on the end of our time together. Time flies fast, but really quickly on the way out here, if we just go around the horn and let the audience know where our audience can find you, get a hold of you, see what you've got going on. Gwen, you want to take us home here?
You have my Twitter handle. You can always find me on Twitter. It's been one of my maybe less healthy habits. And other than that, our website is denial.dev. We have Slack community. We have Discord for Nile users. Yeah, I spend 80% of my time talking to random people, so I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on again the show, Gwen. Ryan.
Yeah, you can find everything you need to know about me on warpstream.com. You can start a demo on that website in less than 5 seconds that spins up a Kafka cluster on your laptop and produces and consumes some data. You should give it a shot. It's very fast.
Awesome. Very fun. Thank you so much, Ryan. John.
Yeah, LinkedIn, please feel free to add me and reach out. We also have our website, sugar.io, if you want to learn a little bit more about what we do.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, John. And Bill, you're all over the place.
I'm not as big on Twitter as Gwen is. I'm trying to learn her magic of Twitter, but you can see my handle here for SaaStar, and you can find me on LinkedIn. And of course, you can find us here every other week on Building SaaS on AWS.
Yeah, and you can of course find me on LinkedIn as well, and other places too. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions, comments that you may have about building SaaS on AWS, the AWS SaaS Factory, or just any other information about tech you want to discuss. I'd be glad to do so. But this has been Building SaaS on AWS. Thank you for joining me here for our first episode of 2024 in this season. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here today, and for everyone for being so active in our comments section. Have a great one. We'll see you in a couple of weeks with our next episode. Bye-bye.
Wow.